Alrighty, yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Mr. DDG94 here, back with another reaction video. Today, we're going to react to the brilliance of the PSP. That's right. We did the GameCube. We did the OG Xbox. We did the Dreamcast. Now, I know y'all's probably like, well, there's only one console left. There were two consoles. Actually, I know some people will say, well, if you're going to do this one, then you got to do the DS. No, fuck the DS. The DS is trash. The DS could never compete with the PSP. PSP was top tier. I don't care. All y'all Pokemon fans out there can talk about, no. Only reason why y'all fuck with the DS is because of Pokemon. Pokemon, that's one game. Versus all the exclusives that Sony had. For the PSP, come on, bro. What is we talking about here? Come on, man. Let's compare apples to oranges. Everybody know the PSP was the greatest handheld console of all time. Even if it didn't sell the most, it was still better because it was ahead of its time. It was ahead of its time. Where do you think the Switch came from? Nintendo fans. Where did you think the inspiration for the Switch came from? It came from the PSP. So don't even sit up here and talk that bullshit. Ain't nobody trying to hear that. Everybody knows the Switch is basically the Nintendo's version of the PSP. Let's be real. But that's neither here nor there. Anyways, though, without further ado, let's get into the arguably the greatest handheld console of all time, the PSP. Fuck the DS. Let's get it.
The PSP, the PlayStation Portable, the pretty small piano black pocket game system, turned 16 years old today, and because I am a trash can fueled by endless junk and hate, I thought it'd be fun to take an...
Actually, I think it's up on 20 years now. Yeah, I think it's either 20 years or 19 years. I don't know if it came out 2004 or 2005. It came out one of them years. So it's either 19 years old now or it's 20 years old now. But either way, it's been 2 decades and this is still arguably one of the greatest handheld consoles to ever exist. Not even arguably, it is the greatest handheld console to ever exist. Fuck am I talking about?
Nostalgic barf trip down memory lane. Earlier this year, I rebought a PSP and I have been having a blast with this thing. The amount of things the system can do is ridiculous. It's full of surprises, hidden gems, and niche games. There's a notorious homebrew scene. There's a lot of value you can get out of a PSP even a decade and a half later. Today we're going to be talking about a few games I picked up on my barf journey, games that I think demonstrate just what a mind-blowing console this was for its time. So when this thing was announced, it was kind of like a big no-duh moment. Like, of course if Nintendo has a handheld, Microsoft and Sony are eventually going to have their own, right? Right? OMG, a leaked picture of Xbox Reading 180, new Xbox handheld, coming holiday 2009. Please 5-star this video. But none of us expected the PSP to be such a technical marvel. It was like someone dropped this thing from the future for us 2005 primitives to get our grubby hands on. It seemingly could do everything. It was the kind of thing we dreamt about but didn't think actually existed. Just the user interface alone was genius, categorizing everything the PSP can do in a very simple and straightforward way. But the problem was, I was 8 years old. Yay! It was always so frustrating how I'd see all these categories, music, internet, but how do I make it work? Where do I plug in the phone line? What's a Wi-Fi? The only thing I knew how to do was play games and watch movies because they came on the UMD, the Universal Media Disc.
Facts. That's why you had to have Bluetooth, man. They was ahead of their time, man. They had the Bluetooth, man, where you could everybody had to be in range. We had to sit in a circle and we could all play WWE and all these other games with each other. All you had to do was just had the Bluetooth on. You turn the Bluetooth on, you turn that Bluetooth switch on, y'all playing the same game. It's a wrap. Everybody gonna have fun. We just had to be in range of each other. You didn't even really need internet back then to play on online on the PSP. You could play with somebody that was just in the proximity of you. That's how ahead of his time the PSP was, bro. The PSP is goated, bro.
Disc, simple enough for my pebble brain to understand. You gotta remember 2005, just a year prior, we were playing 2D games on a Game Boy Advance. If you wanted to watch something like Shrek 2, you were watching it at like 5 frames per second. Now with the PSP, movies
ain't no way the GameCube had videos, bro. Ain't no way, bro. Ain't no way, bro.
Hey, boy, ain't no fucking way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy. No, sir. Not me. Boy, ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no fucking way, boy.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
Ain't no way Game Boy had fucking videos, bro. Ain't no way you was watching Shrek on a Game Boy. Come on, bro. What is we doing? What is we doing?
Actually watchable on the go, and they put out a ton of these things. Everything from Chappelle to SpongeBob, even a decent amount of anime releases. And apparently in Japan they got a lot of porn over there. Why is my PSP import so sticky? Fun fact, in the UK, every single Harry Potter movie was released on PSP. There's a box set of all 8 of them. Harry, you're on the Philosopher's Portable, mate. If the PSP had some sort of cell service, this basically would have been an early smartphone. Ergonomically, I love the PSP. All the buttons feel perfect. The screen is a nice size. This is the 3000 rendition I'm using here, and it's got this nice Spider-Man skin added to it. The only issue with the PSP for me really is that it's missing L2, R2, and a second analog stick. Even though, come on, there's room right there. Look like, come on, Sony, why don't you put it right there? Despite missing some inputs, the PSP is able to play PS1 games with adjustable controls. Playing a game like Crash Bandicoot on the go, it just looks really nice on a small screen. It's so much fun. And if you have the special PSP component cables, you can output these games to a TV and enjoy them like you're actually playing a PS1. Graphically, the PSP sat in this area where it could easily resemble PS2 graphics with some compromises. It gave the system a lot of potential in terms of what kind of games and ports it could get. There's a lot of great looking and impressive games on the PSP, even though the screen is output at like less than 480p resolution. I still find these games to be nice looking on it, especially for its size. We're so desensitized to it now, but it's really hard to accurately capture just how surreal this was to see at the time. First game I ever got for my PSP was Star Wars Battlefront 2, which came out on consoles that same year. I can't stress how insane this was. This alone put PSP on a whole different level for me. I will stand by it to this day. This port of Battlefront 2 is amazing. Yes, the textures are low res. Yes, it's missing the campaign, and yes, it's missing some of the best maps. But when it comes to the actual moment-to-moment gameplay, this is almost a one-to-one rendition. Sure, it came with a lot of compromises, but you were still getting Battlefront 2. Handheld ports before this on Game Boy and whatnot were always forced to be an entirely different game. Here, for the first time in my life, I could take a major release with me on the go. And not just any release, my favorite video game ever at the time. Also, the controls work surprisingly great, even without a second analog stick. There's a bunch of control schemes you can choose from. My favorite is the one called Retro. I just love picking up this game, shooting a few stormtroopers as Han Solo. This was just incredible to have in my hands as a kid. And thanks to the work of modders, you can now restore all the maps that were cut from the PSP version. My childhood dream are right in front of me. LEGO Star Wars 2 is another game that blew my mind in a very similar way, except this port is one-to-one the console experience. All the characters, levels, the same cutscenes, everything is here. It's amazing. Again, if you were playing this on, like, say, the Game Boy Advance, that was an entirely different experience you were getting. This isn't bad per se, but if your friend had LEGO Star Wars 2 on Xbox and you had it on Game Boy Advance, you were talking about 2 different games there. With the PSP, you had the same experience. Other games too at the time. Tony Hawk Underground 2 on PSP was pretty much like the home console versions with some more content. It was a complete game changer. Hey, you wanna know what pisses me off? Pretty much every LEGO game at the time found its way to PSP. You know what game didn't make it to PSP? Even though they had half the work done right there? LEGO Star Wars, the complete saga. Someone's gonna have to pay for this. Moving on, Burnout Legends has also been absolutely addicting. This was my first full Burnout game I've played. This is a very early title for PSP, and it still looks great, and is basically a handheld version of Burnout 3. It's the same fast-paced fun, wrecking other cars is a blast. My productivity suffered a huge hit when I found out about the crash mode. Try to find the best way to cause as much destruction and damage as possible. There's a ton of these challenges and you can do them in a minute, and I would just keep doing one more. Just one more after the other. This is another PSP Essential, and I got it for like peanuts. Or was that a rotten banana peel? Establishing shot of city. Pedestrians walking around, moderate traffic. Why'd I move here? Why don't you look at this cinematic 360 shot while I tell you? Maybe it was the weather, I say as I walk slowly towards camera. And maybe, just maybe, it's because I wanted to be surrounded by so many of my good friends, my good fellas. Hey, it's me, Tony. How you guys doing? Actually, maybe it was the weather.
It's over for guys like us.
Hey, what can I say? I'm a guy in a motorcycle, and I can walk away from explosions all cool. I'm okay. If there's one game I think just cemented the PSP as its next level system that made it a must-have for so many people, it was the Grand Theft Auto spin-offs that perfectly translated the console experience onto a handheld. It just gave the PSP so much more credibility. I cannot believe it. I always heard about these games, but actually playing them now, I'm stupid impressed. Think about how big of a deal it was to have something like GTA 3 at home and be able to take a slice of that carnage on the go in this little tiny disc.
Hey, Tony, ¿qué pasa? Huh? Give us a hug. Hey, you're sticky.
This game came out in 2005, meaning the first year the PSP launched, you could also be playing a brand new GTA on it. A full one with a story, cinematics, missions, the ability to go on huge rampages, everything was here. Same thing with God of War Chains of Olympus. It somehow, someway, perfectly translated the cinematic and visceral style of the God of War games into this little device. You really wouldn't be at fault at all if you mistook these for the PS2 games. It's that impressive.
Is there anything we can do to repay?
Freaky frog! Star Wars, the complete saga on PSP. By the gods, you will take my money!
Frog.
Along that same pulse, Size Matters on PSP was able to shrink the Ratchet & Clank games down to a handheld level, and offer a new adventure with our favorite raccoon-bear robot duo. Hey, is that Gurr from Hot Topic? You think about something like Spyro or Crash when they try to put them on GBA, it didn't really work because these two had no established history being in 2D. With the PSP, these newer mascots, Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter, they didn't have to compromise much at all. Rather, they just offered smaller adventures or played up the spin-off angle. Add more to the list: Crisis Core, Kingdom Hearts, Birth by Sleep, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. I mean, Sony was just swinging with title after title that gave the PSP such a solid library.
I think you've had enough tea for today. Let's get...
Don't you get it? You see the hat? I am Mrs. Nesbit.
The last game I want to mention is a game called Crush. It's this trippy puzzle platformer where you mess around with 2D and 3D perspectives to traverse through levels and crush different perspectives together to platform your way through. It's a very smart and creative game. It just oozes style. Everything's got this nice psychedelic look to it. Even the background slowly breathes like some acid trip.
A big fan of Sisyphus, are you, Doc?
I do not listen to modern pop music, Danny. Now make your way to the exit.
It's definitely a smaller release. It wouldn't be too out of place if somebody referred to this as a hidden gem. But there's a charming edge to it. It reminds me of a mid-2000s graphic novel you'd find at the bottom of some random bin at a book fair. And that is definitely a compliment, by the way.
Job suffered, my colleagues suffered, my cooking suffered. Well, my cooking always suffered, but that's beside the point. I want to get away. Sleeping is all I can think of.
The whole premise behind this game is you are a sleepless schmuck undergoing this experimental hypnotherapy to cure your insomnia, and each level is you diving deeper into your own psyche as you solve puzzles and platform your way through. I wanted to bring up this game not just for its obscurity and style, but games like Crush, even though it's published by, Sega, which is a bigger company, games like it are still emblematic of how many unique and creative games are on the PSP. Before you had digital storefronts for smaller, more experimental indie games, the PSP had a ton of charming, out-of-the-ordinary stuff. It was the perfect combination of offering big, must-have releases and smaller, more thoughtful niche games. Crush is definitely one you should play. There was a remake on the 3DS a few years later, and they absolutely neutered everything. There's no edge or grit to it anymore. They took out that 2000s laser tag arena look and replaced it with what looks like a Caillou spinoff. It's not my Crush. Definitely play the PSP version, which truly is more inventive and experimental. There seems to be this huge misconception that the PSP was some sort of failure just because it didn't sell as much as the DS. Oh man, sorry Rocky, you didn't beat Apollo. I guess you're not gonna get all 7 of those sequels. I can only assume these people either weren't around at the time or are totally misremembering or lumping in the Vita with the PSP, because this thing was not a failure by any stretch of the imagination.
Not at all.
Keep in mind, Nintendo had the handheld game locked down. The Game Boy was untouchable. Nobody came close. Even Nintendo couldn't beat Nintendo.
I mean, it is what it is, but I still say the PSP is the... Listen, we could sit up here and talk about sales all day long, but let's be real. The PSP is the greater handheld console. It was ahead of its time. It did way more than the DS or the Game Boy could. Better games, better graphics, better everything. And you can watch porn on it. Come on, man.
Who's a freaky ass nigga? Who's a freaky ass nigga? Who's a freaky ass nigga? Who's a freaky ass nigga?
Come on, man. You can watch porn on it, man. You could literally open up the web browser and watch porn on it. Do I need to say more? Best handheld console of all time. Fuck you mean?
And here comes the PSP. Yes, it was outsold by the DS, of course it was, but it still made a big impact on the industry and sold over 80 million units. The PSP, the new kid on the block, held its own against the titan that was the Nintendo handheld line.
Yeah, but I'm a freak!
Yeah, me too, Deadhead Fred. And because I'm trash and because I hate myself and I have literally nothing, I decided to fill my trashy dirt hole with a PS Vita, and I've had so much fun with both these Sony handhelds. Even though Vita can perfectly emulate the PSP, I still play both of these things regularly because I love it. I think the PSP reminds me of a simpler time where yes, you were getting a slice of the console experience, but these games were also perfect to play in bursts. They were like fun-sized Snickers as video games. Also, the library of games it got was absolutely massive, a huge contrast from the Vita. I mean, why did we get Harvey Birdman on PSP? Like what? Oh, that wasn't enough? Here is Napoleon Dynamite the game. WTF. No, really. WTF, work time fun. A PSP game where you cap pens. There's already a ton of videos out there why you should buy a PSP or a Vita, even though the latter went severely undersupported. I think either system is worth giving a shot, especially because both can be hacked so easily and turned into an emulation machine with so many great games. I think it's very close-minded to think just because the Vita failed, the PSP also failed by proxy and we'll never see another Sony handheld ever again in history. But just like what a bunch of people said when the Vita launched, I'm not buying it. Especially with how successful the Switch has recently been. I mean, like, come on. Sony has always wanted a piece of whatever pie Nintendo has its fingers in. I think one day we will see a handheld PlayStation again, but what do I know? I'm a trash can. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, man. So that's just gonna about do it, man. The PSP, man. Arguably not arguably, the best handheld console, in my personal opinion. The best handheld console to ever exist. It's not even close. I know some people are gonna be like, well, what about the smartphones? Where do you think they got the inspiration from? Exactly. PSP was ahead of its time, man. It was like he said, if it could if it could take SIM cards, it would have been the first smartphone. The PSP could do it all. It was ahead of its time. Nowadays, you got hella PSPs. You got tablets. You got cell phones. You got Nintendo Switches, Steam Decks. There's hella PSPs out here now, but when PSP was the only thing on the market of its kind, it was a one of one and it was ahead of its time. And that's facts. But anyways, I'm just gonna about do it for this one, man. Man, we finna close out the 6th generation with you know who, the top seller and not even arguably the greatest video game console to ever fucking exist. But we'll have to see that one next weekend. So till then, I'll catch y'all next weekend. Till then, peace out.